Okay, hello again. So, if it's okay with the participants who feel like continuing with this class, I was thinking about focusing on two books actually, and Scott had the idea of completing that by a third one that I think is a good idea, and he can show it to us. Can you put it even nearer to the screen, maybe? Yeah. Roland Barthes, A Lover's Discourse.
Oh.
Which is a book that we slightly discussed last term, and
It's a lovely book.
Yeah, it's a very famous and good book. I can provide you with a PDF of it probably soon. The two books that you may like to buy, if I may be, is the one we discussed last time, Resonance, that you could buy either in German or French or English.
I think we'll go for English, you know.
By Hartmut Rosa. His last name is Rosa, and it's a man. He's a German writer. And the subtitle is a Sociology of the Relationship to the World. Resonance, a Sociology of the Relationship to the World. It's very enjoyable. You don't have to read the whole thing at once. You can just see passages. I've just read the one on drinking and eating, boire et manger, which is linked to the one thing we will discuss today, which is bread.
Can you speak up there? I missed that. What was it linked to?
The one thing we will discuss today, which is bread.
Bread, okay.
And there is another one that's really nice to read, which is about breathing. So as it is a relationship between us human beings and the world, he starts by showing a few examples of the many ways in which we exchange with the world. Even if we want to be totally recluse, we cannot live without exchanging things with the world. It builds a relationship which is more or less harmonious. And this harmony, we are going to read a passage which uses the term vibration. This vibration of harmony is a quality of our relationship to the world. That's what we are going to see today. The quality of the relationship more than a specific thing in itself. Okay, welcome to Sneak and Niall, which we don't see you and your microphones are off, but that's okay with me if you prefer so. Okay.
Hiya, Niall.
Hello. So I was saying that we are going to concentrate on 2.5 books. This book, by Hartmut Rosa, Resonance, that I highly recommend buying. It's a new book. It's very interesting as far as contemporary philosophy goes, because I see there is a new turn that some have called new materialism. You might have heard of it. New materialism being a new twist in philosophy, a new turn, in which we give much importance to what we actually do to the world, do with the world in terms of praxis, in terms of action. So as we build a more respectful relationship with the objects, with the human beings. And it is not a surprise that we see at the same time emerge currents of feminisms, currents of animalisms, which are saying philosophy is not only an abstract way to discuss ontology, whereas Plato is right, conversed Aristoteles, etc. It's also a way to be inside the world in its materiality.
Inside the world. Okay.
And so that's the first book. The second book we have discussed last term already is by a woman named Eva Illouz. She's Israeli. She's lived in France. She's lived in the US. And the book is entitled Why Love Hurts. Both books have to do with the definition of the modern subject. They both authors care to define better what defines us as modern subjects. So that's why I select those two books. And as I was saying earlier, Scott had the great idea of saying that we could as well use a more famous book, a more famous philosopher who died a few decades ago, I think 4 decades ago in the 80s. His name is Roland Barthes or Barthes. The book is called, can you say it, Scott, again?
A Lover's Discourse.
A Lover's Discourse.
Fragments.
It's
an exquisite book, and it's got some lovely quotes from some major philosophers. Yeah. And I really, I'm still just finishing it off, but it was a good suggestion of yours actually last term. So I appreciate that.
Yeah. You might have read already a book that Barthes quotes a lot, which is The Verser by Goethe. The Verser, which is the story of a young man who is in love with a woman. I think it's his cousin. I'm not sure anymore. And he's in love with Lotte. And
That's
Lotte
right.
is so beautiful, and she lives her life not far away from him all the time. And he's suffering every day from this love. And at the end of the book, he does something terrible. He ends his life. I don't like to. Yeah. He ends his life, and I have to say that this book got a tremendous impact on generations, especially the romantic generations. Many men committed suicide for the same kind of reasons. They became passionately in love with women and thought it was the best possible thing to do to commit suicide, which is discussable. There is also this author who all his life, what's his name? He's going to come back, Kleist, who all his life was looking for a suicide partner. And at the end, towards the end of his life, he finds one. And so that's interesting to discuss, because this romantic generation, or this number of romantic generations, prepare in a way modernity, or the modern subject, in one sense at least, which is individualism. The importance given to our feelings as a singular being. Not my feeling as a person who belongs to a specific class and who has to feel this way or this way, but my feelings as a specific individual, or a singular individual, let's say. Okay.
And I guess that puts the individual at the heart of the picture, looking out, rather than trying to see themselves as part of a society, or trying to see themselves as part of a wider humanity.
Exactly.
And that can have a sort of maybe a selfish impact on how they then view what's going on.
Yeah.
As well as the sort of an open-hearted one, there's the opposite sometimes that comes in.
Which was the opposite one?
Well, so both the two books that you mentioned that have to do with love, for example, there is two sides to that. There is a sort of an open, warm-hearted kind of generous spirit of love, and then there is potentially the more self-centered and self-referential kind of love, where you want it to be perfect and it's about you. Yeah.
Exactly. Good point. And so the book by Eva Illouz is how does that love work today with the kind of subjects that we are, which are determined by social trends, technologies. She says there's a market of love that you can notice with applications such as Tinder. And there is an injunction, an imperative to be sexy. We sell ourselves as sexy objects on the market of love. And which explains the great success of brands such as Victoria's Secret. To come back to the idea of suicide, sorry, it comes back to my mind tonight. I'm in a good mood, don't be afraid. The creator of Victoria's Secret actually committed suicide because he sold the brand like $2 million, and then it became this gigantic worldwide company, and he was so pissed and bitter about it that he committed suicide.
Wow.
Okay, but to come back to this idea of selling ourselves as sexy beings, it seems to Eva Illouz as a big turn in our mentality as social subjects, social actors on the market of love. Before, we would try to find a good match in terms of culture, in terms of money, in terms of class, etc. A lot more. It still is so, but a lot less than it used to be now. And the ways in which we would market ourselves were very different from the ways they are now. I give you one example that we mentioned last term. It is the fact that suffering, for instance, during the medieval age of courtly love, was very much valued as something that reinforced the masculinity and the greatness of the man. Whereas today, it's something that is not so much valued. It was valued again during the Romantic period, as for different reasons, but nowadays it's not as much valued, and it's even something that is fought against by all those therapies and people who can help you with self-development, psychiatrists, yoga teachers, etc., to not feel pain, to be at peace with the present moment, to not be a melancholy subject enclosed in your mind, etc. So that's the kind of social differences that Eva Illouz's book make us realize, understand better. Okay, those are the two books and the one by Barthes that I recommend that we are going to work again. And so I recommend that you read and come with some passages that you'd like to discuss, maybe right on the river discussion that you would like to discuss this particular one. Maybe you can present one paragraph or more, and that will be very interesting.
Can I just say at this point, in defense of a lover's discourse, one of the nice things too is that it might just take, here I've just opened at a random page, I am crazy. So,
oh yeah.
And then it might just have a quote by Werther or Augustine. You know, there are just quotes by, or Goethe, as you mentioned. So it's almost like you don't even need to read the whole book if you don't want to. There's just can go from a quote, as you said. It's quite interesting. I like it. specific.
It's a very creative book in terms of writing. I think the equivalent, there would be two sources of inspirations. There are the thoughts by Pascal.
Yeah.
And they are which never were gathered by him, I think because of his early death, actually. They were never organized by himself, but I think by Leon Brunswick. And some writings by Nietzsche, especially the ones at the end of his life. Well, Nietzsche has written fragments all through his life. And the will to power was never organized by him. And a way that Barthes disorganized his book and also his seminars was to create a random, aleatory way to classify them. And sometime he was using the alphabets. I think he's using the alphabet in A Lover's Discourse.
Let me check.
And he's saying the alphabet is so arbitrary.
You're right.
That it's a way to refuse because in order, you know, the double meaning of order. Mm-hmm. Order is organization, but it's also a command, right? And it's a way to refuse with this organization by a mind that would encompass everything, kind of a fascistic way of seeing thought, you know, which would say, I can, from a top, have a general view of each moment that I've lived and written, and it's a way to refuse this upper view of seeing, a helicopter view or skyscraper view.
We think we talk at the moment about helicopter money as to how that could rectify economies, but here it really is just fantastic, because, you know, at the end of an evening or something, you read a page or two and that you can leave it there, kind of thing.
Yeah. So let's start with the things that we were supposed to do on the first class and never happened. And so I will shut that. If you go, I can again share my screen if that's easier. So we were reading one text, and especially the English version of one text, which is the one on resonance. And I will open it again if you need me to do that. Resonance as the key to a successful life. And share my screen. So we were about to read the last part of this text, which started, I think, acceleration, the enemy of resonance. Pretty long. And how do I share, partager l'écran? Okay. Anybody would like to read aloud for us? We haven't heard Susie, we haven't heard James much, we haven't heard Niall.
Okay, yeah, I'll do a bit of reading.
Yeah. So you see where, I think that's where we were. Acceleration, the enemy of resonance. What do you think? Can you read this last paragraph, maybe this one in blue, from this point of view?
Hold on. Acceleration, the enemy of resonance. All right. From this point of view, alienation designates, according to him, a kind of relation without relation. That is to say, a silent relation to oneself, to others, to things and to existence, devoid of reciprocity. I don't know that word.
That's good. Reciprocity.
What does that mean? Devoid of reciprocity.
With no reciprocation, with no one way
Return.
and the other way back.
Okay.
Not shared.
Thank you. The resonance is the reverse because it designates the contrary, a related relation or relation of response.
Thank you. We'll make a pause here. So we did discuss this passage, which was very good. I think I used the example of making love as opposed to having sex. Devoid of reciprocity, an example could be having sex with someone we consider as a sexy object, and making love as something that is meaningful, in which we share deep feelings with the other person. And so a relationship of response, that's what he calls a relationship of response. There are good passages in this book on love, very good passages on love. Very different from the ones in Eva Illouz, actually. Acceleration, the enemy of resonance. Can you continue, Susie?
Rehabilitation of the concept of alienation is consistent with Rosa's concern to subscribe to a prestigious line of social criticism, from which he takes up some of the analyses of modernity to enrich and confront his theory of resonance. It is in Marx that a sociology of the relation to the world in the proper sense appears, affirms Rosa, who considers that the thinker of Treves read our report is the first to link the quality of relations to the world to the conditions social and dominant social relationships. He is thus the first to historicize them, to socialize them, to materialize them consistently.
So you see, we are talking about the verb materializes here, and we were talking about new materialism. And in a way, the father of materialism is who?
Marx.
Marx, yeah. He's famous for his materialistic philosophy. There must be other materialistic philosophers. Even before Plato, they were materialistic philosophers. But he's famous as the modern materialist thinker. I learned recently that he was very anti-Semite, but that's something that has nothing to do with the subject tonight, so I will leave it aside.
Who, Marx?
Yeah, Marx, ferociously racist, and very, very impressively.
Okay.
It is in Marx, so I should just remove that because that comes from the newspaper I took it from. So Marx is the thinker of Treves.
Okay.
The rehabilitation of the concept of alienation, which is the fact that alienation comes back in philosophy, because it used to be used by Marx. It was a big concept in Marx philosophy. We discussed that. You remember we discussed it last time and last term. Alienation is a key concept in Marx philosophy. In which sense? Can you tell me?
Well, we used the example, sorry to butt in, but we used the example last week of Charlie Chaplin in Modern Times.
Mm-hmm.
But it's also thinking about you being a small cog in a big chain.
Yeah,
as
exactly.
we probably all are, but it can be really, you can literally but be on a bit like a Ford La chaîne.
Yeah. La chaîne de travail, the work chain. Is that the
or chain gang almost?
Chain gang. Okay. And what was? Can you remind me the definition that Marx was giving to the concept of alienation? You remember that he said that philosophy consists. I'm inspired by the definition of Deleuze here, who defines philosophy as a work on concepts. And if we work on concepts, on defining here concepts. Do you remember how Marx was defining the concept of alienation?
Would it be someone that doesn't conform to a capitalist society?
Actually, no, it's the converse, but you're close. You're very close. It's someone that conforms to what did you say?
The capitalist society.
Yeah, to the commands of the, he actually, someone who's alienated conforms to it. And what is the effect of this conformation is that the worker loses his own power to produce. He's losing, as he doesn't own the
Means of production.
The means of production, very good. He is disowned of his own power to produce.
And therefore doesn't have choices like he would
Exactly.
normally.
He becomes enslaved to the big machine of capitalism. Very good. So here, that was the traditional, or at least traditional in modern philosophy since Marx and Engels, definition of alienation. And here there's a rehabilitation, which means this concept still matters, yet it is slightly different than it is in Marx philosophy. So I read back from here, it is in Marx philosophy that a sociology of the relationship to the world in the proper sense appears, affirms Rosa. The first, so this thinker, Marx, is the first to link the quality of the relationship of the relations to the world to the conditions, social and
dominant. Yeah.
I think there's an of missing.
There's enough missing to link the
conditions
quality
of social and dominant relationships and dominant social relationships.
Yeah. To link the quality of the relations to the world to the conditions of social and dominant social. It's too complicated. I will have to work on this translation again.
Is he really the first one? Wasn't there some Greek philosophers that also had not for the workers and capitalism, but they also had a sort of similar concept back in Greek philosophy? That was off the wall philosophy as well. Wasn't your normal?
I don't think so. I mean, Aristotle is a materialist, that's for sure. There were materialists before Aristotle. The first guy or person to say there is a link between the quality of relations to the world and the conditions and the social conditions was Marx.
Did Plato not have anything to say about it in the Republic?
Probably. There's so much in the Republic that there must be something akin. Yeah.
I think there is something akin, actually.
Yeah.
But he did
seeing it in the same light, in the same way, but it would be interesting to compare, and I've never studied it. But.
I'm going to see the passage. We make a pause at some point, and I'm going to see the translation that was made by a robot and redo it during the pause. So, okay, let's continue quoting. So we're going to see that was the root of the concept of alienation was found in Marx, and he explains why. Because when you deteriorate the social conditions, you deteriorate also the relationships of people to the world. So that's the main idea. Let's continue. Susie, one more paragraph.
Quoting at length Lukács, Weber, Seymour, then from Marcus Adorno, the author, shows how all these authors have linked the processes of commodification and bureaucratization of the lived world to its growing inhospitality for the modern subject of which we are all avatars. Despite their foreknowledge of the gigantic alienation processes still at work, Rosa believes that modernity cannot be interpreted unequivocally as a catastrophe of resonance.
As
A catastrophe of resonance.
Yeah, very good. So, maybe I will select a few words here. So, commodification. We know what that means.
Yeah, that's also connected with Marx, isn't it?
Yeah.
You talked a lot about commodification.
Yeah, to turn, let's call them things, into objects of consumption. Bureaucratization, having a lot of people dealing with not the materiality of things, but with the organizations of the production on paper or on dematerialized paper as it is now, computers. And it contributes to the growing inhospitality of the modern subject, for the modern subject, of the world for the modern subject. So the world become more and more inhospitable to us. Yet,
it's very interesting because that's my daughter would agree with that, being disabled and not being able to read and write. She would have said that she's noticed it a lot. It alienates people.
Yeah.
Yet, Rosa says that modernity cannot be equaled to, is that good English?
Yeah.
Yeah. There is no simple equation between modernity and catastrophe of resonance, which means that we are not doomed in our modernity to experience the world in a non-resonant way. We can still be in resonant relationships to the world. Anybody would like to share ideas or comments on that?
Does it depend somewhat on your budget, your status, your flexibility? Because thinking about how some people have gardens, some people can travel, some people can get peace and quiet, and some people can't actually. And I personally feel this sort of resonance idea has a lot to do with finding moments and places of peace. And that can be very difficult when you come from live in certain places or have potentially less flexibility or budget to find that.
Yeah, you make me think of this little discussion I had with two friends recently, and we were upscaling each other. I think that's the word. One of them was saying, I was in Paris recently, and I noticed that over there, they are so much more polite than in Nice. They stop for the red lights, they are more courteous, etc., etc. And I say, well, it's true, but I've lived recently in Casablanca, and so to me, Nice feels like Switzerland right now. and then there was another friend who said, well, I've lived recently in Mumbai, and I'm sure that Casablanca would feel like Switzerland to me. And yeah, I'm sure I've never been in Mumbai, but I'm sure I've heard about the constant noise over there. And we are going to actually next time read a specialist of noise, something and silence. Maybe you've read this article, I will post it soon. Silence as something that is often not valued much, but which is at the root of many other things. If there's silence, that means you can actually breathe better, you can hear each other better, etc., etc.
That's
Okay.
interesting, because you also, I presume you're saying that depending on your experiences of the universe or the world, would also give you, in some people's resonance might not be other people's resonance. So there would be a differing of opinion as to the resonance. So what you'd have to do is come across a general resonance, if you were talking about the world or the universe, that's acceptable for everybody.
Have we defined
Yes.
resonance? I missed last week, so I just wanted to check whether we'd defined that or not.
Actually, what you're saying, Susie, makes me think about what Rosa talks about in I think it's the preface or the introduction. He has a preface and an introduction in this book, and he's saying, and that's what we'll come back to very soon, is that for some people, what is more enjoyable is playing football, and for some people it's going to the gym. And you can say, well, I don't need other people to play the ball with to feel good and to feel some resonance in my body. I prefer to be in my music and with focusing on my strengths and not having the shocks of other people, etc. I feel more resonance.
Yeah, but there's also a different resonance if we're talking about the world and the universe and stuff.
Mm-hmm. Good. Can you elaborate?
I think I did touch on it last week when I was making an example, and Noel will know this example from some of the, and Scott. When we say it's materialism, it's the materialistic point of philosophy. When we say the sun is shining, we all know what that means, or most of us know. Mm-hmm. But we will have different interpretations of what that actually means as well. Mm-hmm. So we know there's a sun in the sky that's, giving out heat or energy and stuff, but sun is shining could mean lots of things to a lot of different people. Okay. But it does give you the same sort of feeling when the sun's shining. It gives you a warm mm-hmm. feeling in mm-hmm. most cases, unless it's too hot. So the resonance in general, the world in general, would be an agreed thing, like the sky is blue and the chair is there or whatever. Mm-hmm. We are here, listening.
Good weather for surfers is the tempest, right? Which is bad weather for everybody else.
For sure.
We live in England, so weather is quite topical. Always accepted.
Yeah, sorry, I typical English, talking about the weather again. Yeah. But anyway, what I'm trying to say is that, again, we have an agreed, accepted idea of the world, but we all have our own ideas within that world of different things.
Yeah.
Because we're all diverse, we're all different. So therefore our resonance would be different. Uh-huh. Like the resonance of the world at the moment is not so clever because of COVID. But, normally, but some people are actually not enjoying COVID, but they're enjoying the effects of COVID because it's actually teaching them things, and it's teaching them about themselves that they've never had the experience of in the same way before.
That's exactly what the second article is talking about. And Niall.
To say, like the Buddha's basic maxim is detachment, which many people find through through, I don't know, giving up attachment to everything in life, or through a crack pipe, or through a big sports screen showing sports on TV and hypnotizing yourself. So the idea of consuming things is like your work like a machine, and then you need a way to resonate with the rest of the world.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, it's a bit, yeah, there's this paradox of the yoga room to be the moment in which you consume a detachment, you know?
Mm.
I'm trying to elaborate on what you're saying. Is like you consume all the time, and then you go to the yoga studio and you're like, let's consume for 1 hour and a half the concept of detachment.
Yeah, I don't think I wasn't really talking about. I wasn't talking so much about yoga. I was just saying that the kind of the first tenet of Buddhism is very much like, say, it's very much like, say, a drug addict's relationship to a crack pipe, or a person hypnotizing themselves by watching a huge plasma screen with sports being directed and just sitting there watching it. Because after they've worked, they come home and they do whatever activity to find their resonance in the world.
I would argue that that's not finding your resonance. I would argue, and from what I understand of the very limited Buddhist reading I've done, is that is actually more about putting yourself in a trance and to turn away or turn off, which is a different kind of peace altogether to what I understand resonance meaning, which is more of an open connection. So, you know, kind of taking drugs or taking certain types of drugs feels more like a sort of closing off and a shutting down, whereas the resonance, and maybe that's where certain other drugs might come in, is more about opening up and being awake and being alive to that resonance in some way. There's a different state between those two things.
Never mind TV, but thinking about YouTube, there was someone at work that I spoke to a year or so ago about someone called Abraham Hicks, who might be termed some kind of more hippie thought in a way, and I don't mean that pejoratively, in terms of vibrations and finding people that are on the same vibrational wave as yourself, and that is a form of resonance, I suppose. I don't know, thinking just the word of resonance, no more than that, it's just a thought.
I think that's why it's important that we read not necessarily the whole book, but more of the book, all of us, so that the concept of resonance really becomes a concept in our minds and not just a notion. Because otherwise you could even argue that having a Führer, a leader with very bad intentions, making a big crowd resonate with hate speech, you know, about something, could be a form of resonance. So yeah, it's important to dig further into that concept to actually see if we understand well this concept as a concept and not just as a notion. Let's continue with whoever would like to read from Not Only Does.
I'll give it a go. Not only does the experience and the search for resonance remain alive, but it has encouraged by the push to further expand our access to the world. The problem is that the forms taken by this incentive to explore or acquire more and more parts of the world have ended up destroying the possibilities of establishing stable acts of resonance. This is where we find the notion of acceleration. Rosa indeed defines modernity, including its non-Western variations, as a continuous process of dynamization or of ever more rapid setting in motion of material, social and spiritual relationships, with this decisive precision that this process is essential to the simple reproduction of the social and institutional order. This shed light on the paradox of the dynamic stabilization of our societies. overbinding in terms of production and technical and cultural acceleration is necessary for their regular functioning. Interesting. Previously, the stabilization of societies was not static, but adaptive to the environment. Although possible, growth was not the imperative that it has become, and one that anyone can experience. We have to run faster and faster in order to hold our place in the world. However, the consequences turn out to be deleterious for our appetite for resonance. You'll have to explain that to me.
So yeah, this is important. We have to run faster and faster, which is an incentive, the incentive we were talking about, of modernity. To run faster and faster, produce more, etc., in order to hold our place in the world. That is, if, for instance, if you've worked in business, you know that each year you need to make a little more than the previous year, and your position, your presence inside the company depends on your ability to make a bigger number each year, to augment the
pie.
The pace, which we have seen so much with delivery services, for instance, which is something we might talk about as an example further. From what we call the postal service, which we used to know with the letters we would send each other, which would take maybe a week sometimes to arrive, and now the emails, faster and faster. With FedEx and now Amazon implanting big how do you call the places where you keep merchandise?
Warehouses?
Warehouses in France, so that even in France the thing would arrive like that in 24 hours. So that's the dynamics of what we call, or what Rosa sees as modernity. I don't know if I agree with that. That's not my definition of modernity, but that is his. That's his concept of modernity. And we, at least the basic trait of it. So, and one thing is noticed is that our social positioning on the social scale depends on our ability to go faster and faster, to adopt this rhythm and actually to be a participant, an actor in this augmentation of pace. And he has very interesting remarks on even the way we make hobbies. You may notice in the way you make hobbies that you will always, or at least most of us, try to push the limit a bit further. I don't know if you are joggers or swimmers, but you want to perform every day a bit better than the day before, you know? And it's a very shared trait in the sports world today.
Because there was one of the words that I captured from that was the idea of growth, which is very much hotly debated at the moment, isn't it? The Greens people would probably say, you know, we don't need this growth, and yet well, look, we're still alive now, we're still breathing without the world spinning round ever quicker because it's slowed down for the last 6 months, I think.
Yeah, and the growth of what? Yeah. And the most interesting, if I may use this word, economists that I listen to at the moment, such as Gaël Giraud, for instance, is saying the GDP is actually one of the worst economic indicators that you can have, because it tells you nothing about resonance, or, if you will, happiness, or the goodness, you know? Not to fall into the cliche of Bhutan being the happiest country in the world because people are actually starving over there. I just saw a very good film on Bhutan that I recommend. It's called Sing Me a Song. It's a documentary. it seems so much like a fiction that it seems in between fiction and documentary. I recommend it very much. I'm glad I think about it. I wanted to think about it because it's a very good example of something, actually technologies, new technologies, disrupting a long acquired tradition of resonance. The tradition of Buddhism, of little monks, children choosing out of their own appetite to become a monk, the career of monk, and being, how would you say, seduced away from it by their phones, by video games, etc. And our culture. So at some point there is a disheartening scene where they buy plastic toys, which are actually weapons. They are disrupted in their path to become wise men. So it's actually, if you take the root of the word philosophy, someone who loves wisdom, it actually disrupts philosophy. I don't know what is it, but there is this it that disrupts philosophy. Is it modernity? Maybe. Is it something in modernity that disrupts philosophy? That's more specific, it's maybe better. I've talked too much. Can you say something?
Antoine, so you said you didn't agree with Rosa's definition of modernity. What would yours be?
I don't disagree with it. I'm sorry if I say that I don't agree. I'm saying that amongst the different ones that I've read about recently, it's not my favorite one, and it's not the one that influences me the most. I'm closest to the one by Foucault, which I have started the class with which I have started the class, which is, and the way I formulate it each time is a bit too complex and confused so far. I hope I will come with a more clearer definition at the end of the session, at the end of the term. Modernity for me, because this text by Foucault, Was ist Aufklärung, What is Enlightenment, which is a text interrogating a text which also has this title by Kant, seems to me a very, very strong text. What the text says, if I remember it well, is modernity is not so much a period of time, it's not so much an epoch, it's more an attitude. And each epoch has its own modernity, and the way you can define modernity thus is when someone decides to question the very specificity or singularity of their own time. To be able, from this questioning, to be able to better act in it, even if acting is just more questionings, but to be more pertinent or relevant in your time.
An extension of enlightenment.
Yeah, in a way, yes. Yeah.
But could it also be in a civic sense? So in the 60s, there might have been some people that were ahead of the curve in thinking about certain subjects.
Yeah.
Possibly, other people, traditionalists might dispute that, I suppose.
Yeah, so there's an interesting way here to understand the concept of modernity in Foucault's thought, because as he was stressing the importance of modernity, people were creating the word postmodern or postmodernity. And in a way, to stress the word modernity was a way for Foucault to refuse this trend, or to say this trend is a bit ridiculous, or he wasn't that concise. Because to him, as I was saying before, each period or each epoch has to be modern in a way. There is this repetition, a bit of a Nietzschean eternal return, if you want, of modernity. The return of the difference, as Deleuze would say in his book, Difference and Repetition.
Could I say something?
Of course.
I might be totally off the wall and totally wrong, but modernity definition, surely, because there's a lot of history of arguing about what is modernity.
Yeah.
Surely it's the same argument as the fact that we're all diverse gives us different meanings to that word, modernity. And in my mind, there is a resonant modernity and a non-resonant modernity. Obviously, there's a lot more subcategories to it.
Yeah.
I can't see it just being one or the other, but both.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. As Rosa at the end of the part that we were starting with today was saying, there is a relationship without relation and a related relation, a relation of response. You may say as well, there is a modernity with resonance and a modernity with no resonance. An example of modernity with no resonance would be Modern Times by Charlie Chaplin. And actually, you could take other examples from Charlie Chaplin, for instance, The Kid by Charlie Chaplin, where you feel this resonance between the kid and Charlot. And it's actually the same theme as a theme we've discussed with the book, the Childhood of Jesus, the Childhood of Jesus, which is about someone being in charge of a kid which is not his own, and trying to find a lady who's richer to be able to provide more for him so that he has a better opportunity in life. And so here you see an example of, in modern times, there is an example of a poor man taking care of an orphan. And here, does it have to do with the machine? No. But does it have to do with modern times? Yes. Because our society creates orphans and creates poverty. And therefore, there is something specific to our time. Maybe it has happened before, but what kind of poverty, what kind of orphans, and how can they relate to each other? Maybe not the same kind as in the times when Charlie Chaplin was alive, but orphans of migrations, for instance, as in the book, The Childhood of Jesus.
Well, it was interesting the time of Charlie Chaplin because he was accused of being a communist. So whatever he did, he had to be careful how he did his films.
Yeah, it's like being accused of being nice, huh?
Yeah, well, to a degree. In the American sense, no, but in our sense, yes, maybe.
What's good?
Sorry, Scott. Go.
Well, what I was going to say, what America's loss was our gain. He came back to Europe, didn't he?
Yes, he did. Yeah, he came back to London as well.
Although he did go to Switzerland, I think, nearer the end.
Yeah. However, the consequences turn out to be deleterious for our aptitudes for resonance. Let's continue a bit. On the one hand, Scott, you reading?
Okay. On the one hand, the establishment of axis of resonance requires patience, just as their experience implies a less frenetic and calculating relationship with time. In short, the temporal structure of our societies is adverse to resonance. On the other hand, the atmosphere of constant competition tends to undermine our self-confidence and encourages us to treat the world only as a set of resources to be appropriated. Obviously, the logic of reification is also antagonistic to the vibrant relation to the world described above. The late modernity described by Rosa therefore tends to multiply the blockages of resonance. Can that then be explained to me? Because you can read, I can read something, but I'm not taking it in.
Yeah, let's come back to this passage, which is maybe the most difficult. Obviously, okay, that's cool. This logic of reification. Reification, anybody knows what that means? It's kind of similar to commodification. It's not turning a thing into a good for consumption. It's turning a thing. It's turning something into something material, such
So it's
as
turning something into a commodity.
not yeah, almost. It's ray is the word rest, thing, and here it has a material connotation. Rest as something material. So turning things into material things. Let's say, for instance, we turn love into an app, right? We turn
Beauty. We turn beauty into a commodity.
into makeup. Yeah, but
Yeah,
that would be commodification. So, but it doesn't matter. I think here they are very synonymous in this paragraph. This logic of reification is also antagonistic. We understand that word, goes against the vibrant relation. So vibrant relation could be a synonym, is a synonym of resonance, yeah? Vibrant relation to the world described above. Okay. The late modernity described by Rosa, so not so much Charlie Chaplin's age, I guess, but the last few decades, described by Rosa, therefore, tends to multiply the blockages of resonance. So that's why I wanted to mention the movie Sing Me a Song today, is because, for instance, if we think about our cell phones and maybe our computers, and our cell phones are small computers, we know that. If we see them as an example, there are indeed, in many ways, blockages of resonance. Why? Because they capture our attention so much that we don't perceive around us anymore. We tend to be accaparated, is that a word in English? Accaparated? By the many seductive strategies that are built in them to capture our attention. And so you would have news of the latest victories in Roland Garros, for instance, on your phones, popping up on your phones. You would have all kinds of news. We've never read as much news as today, right? Mm-hmm. We read them in small forms. I guess we don't generally read the whole articles, otherwise we would spend our whole life reading articles. But we are full.
We absorb it.
Yeah, can you say it?
We absorb it.
We absorb it. We are fed with much news. And
but is that because I think we've spoken in the past about kind of being of the world or in the world, that it's almost now by the inputs that we get, video, TV and so forth, we like to think of ourselves as more worldly or bigger in the world,
yeah,
when in actual fact it's probably the other way around, because we're having less interaction with our local world than we could otherwise have had in the past, given what we've kind of spoken to today, in part.
Neil, you want to say something? James?
I was thinking before, and I was talking about the end of the Enlightenment, and I tend to think of modernity as like a system that's in continual and complex communication with itself. So it's competing all the time with itself. And so when we start at the end of the Enlightenment, we start to get to the point where we're taking people from the Atlantic slave trade, perhaps, and we're moving beyond our natural feelings to import people and commodify people, to trade them, to take them across to the Americas, to take them across to South America and things like that. So I know that there's all these figures of, you know, modernism, if you like, the modernist people of Charlie Chaplin and of Picasso and all this, but in terms of just modernity, I'm wondering, my question would be, when does modernity really start, if you want to define it as a system of communication in constant competition with itself? So before in feudal times, we didn't have a system that was in consistent communication with itself. But we get to a point, so that's why I'm trying to bring in the Enlightenment, started the Enlightenment, Atlantic slave trade, things like that. When, if we want to sort of think about a definition of a system, when would you think it starts? Or
well, I don't know, but I think you have a
I don't know.
very interesting way of trying to conceptualize modernity. Indeed. Bye bye, Gilly, if you need to go.
Thank you very much. I'll see you next week.
See you.
Bye.
Bye.
Yeah, so you're saying a system of communication in permanent competition
with itself. Yes.
With itself.
Yeah, so it's a point saying history, where if you want to talk about history in that sense, but it's a point in time. So we have a resonance. So it's a point when the resonance becomes a system that is in constant and competitive communication with itself.
Yeah.
Whereas there's time before that where it isn't that.
I just wonder, I hear what you're saying, and I accept thinking about, even you could kind of say capitalism starts out of the Dutch and the lending of money and ships and all that then follows, and trade, commerce, slaves, all the rest of it. But in terms of this text, I just wondered, because in terms of what I read through there a bit, I was taken more by the bit of what saps us in terms of the competition. Almost
of what?
What saps. SAPS, yeah. What saps is what actually what gets taken away from the competition, which I think is a bit like when you said, I'm not talking about the Chaplin in that bit or the other. That's exactly the bit that I, in my mind, find easier to pull on the strand of in the way in the world we exist as we are now. And it's probably one that I can resonate more with, simply because it's what I see more. Whereas in the Enlightenment, there, the way that it's sold to me now, it's all great paintings and moving over to another way of thought and dividing things.
Yeah, so it's a scientific age. It's a way of moving away from thought about, say, religious.
Yeah.
Spiritual things like that. But I don't think it's just about capital. And that's why I think resonance is a great place to start when you're thinking about modernity, because it seems to be about time and people being out of time.
Yeah.
You made me think about one instance in particular. In epistemology, modernity is often linked to one specific man, who is Galileo. Yet Galileo Galilei was, his name was Galileo Galilei. He was also inspired, or at least had some links with another thinker who was not even a scientist, if I read the biography, the right biography, whose name was Giordano Bruno, right? And Giordano Bruno was a very inspired man who was saying, well, I feel well, he was, I feel that the earth is not the center of the universe. I feel that the universe is infinite, etc., etc. He had no scientific way to prove it, but he made these claims a bit too noisy, and he became cinders.
Silenced, yeah.
He was
Okay.
he was burnt.
Yeah.
So Galileo Galilei thought that making these claims again more scientifically was maybe a good idea in terms of science, but not in terms of living longer. So he worked on it, yet he kept it a bit secret, or like he built many strategies to not be antagonistic with the church. And so in terms of mankind, which is what we are discussing about after all, modernity has to do with the fact that at some point physics was no more Aristotelian, even though Aristoteles in some ways was the father of biology and everything. It became scientific in a different way, and there was a separation between the beliefs and science. This separation happened before, but at this point, so you can claim that there were other modernities before this moment. But this is such a big moment of split between religious thoughts, beliefs, and science, when actually there are people who can prove that the earth is not the center of the world, etc., etc. That there is this trend of thinking in epistemology that this is what we call the beginning of modern times, modern age.
For sure, yeah.
But your definition or your way of...
What did you say, the beginning of?
Modern times.
Modernity.
Oh, right, okay, yeah.
So Galileo gives us a language of mathematics to describe everything in science. But what he doesn't give us is the way of describing the problem, the huge problem now, which is consciousness. So he doesn't talk to us about how blue is, what type of, when you're feeling blue, when you're depressed, how depressed, what color is the blue? When you feel some chili on your tongue, how is that? How hot is that chili? There's no way to measure these things.
Yes and no. I don't know. I'm not a
well, there isn't. I mean, in the sense that there's no, you can sort of do lots of things with neurology and look at them and see the part of the brain, but there's no real way of pinpointing how, even at this stage, maybe people think there will be, but there's no way of measuring materially of how that chili is and why that chili is hot to one person but not so hot to another person, or what a person sees when they look,
But I agree and I disagree, but I see your point.
There are ways of measuring, because you can wire people up neurologically. But what Niall's saying is, because we have a diversity in our brain patterns, what one person would feel as pain wouldn't be the same tolerance as another person, for instance.
Yes.
Right now?
Yeah, I'm saying that, yeah.
But if we can,
I'm saying he gives us a mathematical language to measure everything, but he doesn't give us the access to consciousness, or to what people would call the soul in Aristotelian times.
And I think you have a very good point here, which we can relate to the sentence we are trying to comment, which is that Galileo Galilei gives us, in a sense, the opens the door to modernity, but in another sense, no. Why?
Because it doesn't give you the resonance in the same way.
Yeah, and because modernity can be conceptualized in different manners. And one way to conceptualize modernity, as I've explained, is the Enlightenment Kant's way, or Foucauldian way by Foucault, which is different. Galileo never asked himself, what is the peculiarity of the moment I'm living in? He was doing something else. He was asking, is the universe infinite? Is the Earth, yeah, okay. And what we call late modernity, or what Rosa calls late modernity, is much closer to the idea you were developing before, which is a society speeding movements, all kinds of movements, and a system being constantly in competition with itself. And that is why it's creating blockages of resonance. And that Galileo has not conceived.
No.
Maybe he has been a key moment in the history of this happening. Maybe he triggered that effect, but he never conceptualized that. And so if we conceptualize that as late modernity, then it is not, Galileo is not the key figure in that moment. Even maybe Jeff Bezos could be the key figure as an example, or who you could take someone else. But he is kind of an interesting figure as far as speed. Elon Musk as well. You know, Elon Musk is famous for saying, if you have a 10 years plan, why not make it a 6 months plan? So maybe you won't make it in 6 months, but at least you will have it made in less than 10 years, you know?
But is that because of the time in which he lives, and thinking about, say, the last 6 months? You know, a lot of things have gone remote, a bit like the lessons, but it's also in terms of work, and that, you know, people can, in terms of tech startup, make great strides, whether it be economic or in terms of a platform, very, very quickly. And I think we are living in a very strange epoch in that sense, because it's almost like capitalism is reinventing itself, but in front of our eyes at a pace that the average human being is beguiled by, but also repulsed by. And yet it's not just beguiled, it's that we consume it at the same time.
Yeah.
You know, so it's
we are excited by it, we are enthusiastic about it, we like having a frappuccino with the screen and the telephone nearby, and things happening all around. We love it. It's addictive. It makes you it fights the existentialist angst for the void of our lives. Yet, I think there's another thing that we can bring here, which is that Elon Musk, if I take him as a philosophical character or concept, we discussed them last term, conceptual character, he can be turned into one. He's saying, for instance, that his appetite to send missions on Mars has to do with the fact that we don't know as a species if we can still live on this vessel, Earth, for a very long time. We might have just a tiny window of time to actually execute this performance of sending a number of people there, a colony there, to save mankind in case this vessel ends at some point.
Which has always been the subject of sci-fi, hasn't it, in the past? Not reality.
Yeah, I see your point. Yeah, and he might be slightly right in his I mean, is probably right and knows a lot more on the subject than I do. Yet, you can also argue against this point of view that Mars doesn't seem very livable. Even the fact of making kids over there seems difficult. There are recent science articles on that. Making Earth more livable could be our task today. And that could be actually the idea that I want to bring here to comment on a passage we've read before when we read that, here. Rosa believes, Rosa believes that modernity cannot be interpreted unequivocally as a catastrophe of resonance. What if we ask ourselves the good question about the moment we are living in and make the transformations that are needed now, so that we, instead of diminishing resonance, increase our capacity to resonate? So, for instance, what if we come back to growing our vegetables? Mm-hmm. Because we understand that now our time is, now that we are almost 8 billion on this planet, and that we have had a bad impact on it, we must take action to change our habits in many ways. One of them is food, and one of them is bread. And I suggest to make a pause here now, like 2 or 5 minutes, as much as you want. Let's say as much as 5. And we come back with the video on bread. If you haven't seen it, you can start watching it.
Well, do I just go back to the main feed page on Riva to see that link?
Yeah. Okay. It's on the topic 2 and 3. There's you go down. There's bread, and there's a video link. 2 videos. I think the YouTube one is better for you.
Thank you. I'll have a look.
You in 5.
Okay. 6 months is too long. Probably be for the spring. I could chase it.
Hello?
Hello.
Oh, sorry, is that you speaking to me?
To everybody, I'm thinking about the best way to start again. What do you think? We
I'm
start
just
the
going to come
video
back.
together.
Yeah, I don't know where I've gone. I can't see any of them.
You know.
Okay.
There I can. I'm back. I'm
I'm
back.
going to start the video myself, but have you watched the video?
Yeah.
So there were a few minutes that I was saying were the most interesting for class, I think. And so I have a few questions that I wanted to ask you, or that you can consider and watch the video afterwards if you haven't yet. So they are here. I'm going to place there. You see my screen?
Yeah.
Cool. So, yeah, let's come back to, I'm using that as an example. So it's an Austrian film named Brot that was played on Arte months ago, less than a month ago. Arte is a very good TV channel, by the way. The only one that is not preventing you from resonance, I believe. And so I selected specific minutes which are here from 4:30 to 13:13. But before we speak about those minutes, let's introduce a bit this movie with a few questions. Grammatically speaking, what is the word bread?
Grammatically.
Yeah, grammatically, it's a very simple question. Maybe it's because it's simple that it seems weird. Grammatically speaking, what is the word bread?
Well, it's not a verb and it's not an article.
No, it's, yeah, good.
So
It is,
was it a noun or some description?
it is a noun, and more technically, we can call it a substantive.
Okay.
Substantive,
That's it.
as opposed to an adjective, for instance. Substantive, which means something that holds substance. So with verbs, for instance, relate things that are supposed to have substance that we name with substantives. With adjectives, we give qualities to those substantives, etc. Therefore, so I was trying to read my own sentence, sorry. Therefore, is it more? There's a word missing here. Is it more? Is it more in the direction of what Rosa calls substantial, something substantial or something relational? The word bread.
Substantial.
Substantial, very, very simple. So it seems that we are going to see a movie, a film, a documentary film on something substantial that we know very well, something very commonplace, bread, that is substantial and that is even the epitome of what is substance, right?
Yeah.
Eat this bread, this is my body.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah? So the paradigm, what was the paradigm Rosa was using? It was using the opposition between substantial and relational, and he was saying that resonance is less to be found in something substantial, if you remember last class, than in something relational, in the relation between somebody with the world, with someone else, with something, with an activity. Therefore, I'm asking you the question, what other word would express better the second term of the paradigm? So I said the paradigm was substantial and relational. So the second term is relational. So if we're using another word than bread to express relational, what word would you choose? Not bread, but another word.
Life.
Like
Life.
life is maybe too general to talk about, to be the title of this movie, right?
Okay.
What would be less general?
Ah, traditional bread.
Yeah, but yet you're using the same kind of grammatical word, right?
True.
Same category. So not
Help me
bread,
out,
but
guys.
yeah. Okay, I'm helping you. It's very simple though. Here, I took this to help.
Ah,
This is wine, right? Let's say it's wine. It's the image of a wine glass, at least. This is wine. If I say wine, I'm still
the blood
giving
of
it,
life.
yeah, the blood of life. I'm still giving it a substantial tone, right? Because I'm using a substantive. Whereas if I'm using another word that may name the action I'm performing now, I'm more into something relational.
Yeah,
Which
okay.
is,
It could be eat.
yeah. So
Yeah.
drinking, for instance.
Drink or eat. Yeah, I see.
Drinking could be the name of the, yeah.
Or eat. Yeah, I see.
So here we could have named the movie not bread, but
The eat off.
baking.
Baking.
How about baking?
The big bake off.
Baking. So baking would have stressed the second term of the paradigm more, which is if we have a paradigm which has two terms. One is substantial or substance, if you will, and the other one is relational or relation. If I have the word baking as the title of my movie, then I'm stressing the idea of something relational more than with the word bread, right?
Yeah. Thanks.
Yet the filmmakers decided to keep the word Brot, the equivalent of bread in German. Do you think it is an intelligent choice? Why?
Yes.
Yes, why?
Because in Germany, you have to pass a lot of exams to be a baker and to make bread. And so it's quite a skilled thing to be a baker. You can't be you can be a baker in this country and just work and make plastic bread. But in Germany, you have to be spend a lot of time and be an apprentice baker, be a craft baker.
Well, that is a very interesting cultural comment. Yet it's not at all the kind of answer I was expecting in the sense of why do you think it is an intelligent choice to use the word bread and not baking as the title of the movie?
Okay, sorry, go.
I think regardless of the era you live in or what social class that you're in, it's just one of the building blocks of life as we experience it. So from that point of view, I think it's kind of interesting that they use the word brot in actual fact, because sometimes my mind has gone to the dark times of the 1930s and 40s where you know, life was so hard that, you know, you'd have to probably take a wheelbarrow just to buy a loaf of bread somewhere. So in Weimar, Germany or something. So I think it's trying to ground us in the essentialness of what the matter is of the subject.
Well,
bread.
you're closer to what I was thinking, which what I'm thinking is not the ultimate interpretation of that title, but it's one of the potential interpretations. And what I'm thinking is, if your strategy as a filmmaker is to show that bread is more than just bread, but people, as Neil was saying, who have craft, who work on it, who relate not only to cereals, but to a certain place where they make bread, where they smell they share this experience with other people, where they sell it as something they care for, value, or other people who want the bread to be qualitatively good, but made at a very high pace, so that they sell a lot of them to the whole, to as many possible people in Germany, for instance, or in Europe. And so here you understand that bread is more than just a substance. It's a relationship to the world that's different whether you want your shop to be small and to have a traditional way of making bread and to sell to people around you, or you want to modernize your company and have as many styles of bread as possible from different countries and kind of steal their flavors to manufacture them to the rest of the world, so that you don't need to be in Italy, in this particular place in Italy, to have this particular flavor of bread. Yeah, which is a way Rosa defines modernity. Actually, in the next article we would have read, and that we're going to keep for next time, which is a way to have things at hand. Vorhanheit, I think it is in English, in German, and in French it's disponible. And in English,
Available.
And with available, you lose that, and you lose that a bit in French as well, the idea of the hand being able to grasp it. Yeah, that you have in Vorhandenheit or Zuhandenheit. I'm terrible in German. I just know the words from my readings of Heidegger. So these are very famous concepts in Heidegger's philosophy in Sein und Zeit. And I'm not promoting Heidegger here, but it's sure that Rosa is influenced, at least in this piece of his philosophy, by Heidegger's philosophy. The idea that you make the whole world graspable, such as you can do on Netflix, for instance, which was a good thing, or which is a good thing, to have movies from India graspable on your computer right away, like that, you know, in a click. It's nice. It's good because someone who is stuck in Montana, in the cold of Montana, can discover about another culture in South Africa or whatever, and he has the tool to do it, and it happens fast. It doesn't. Okay, so yeah, I made my point.
No, but it's nice to hear it in a different form.
And you have the same idea here with bread and the different types of how is it in
standardization, homogenization.
Yeah, and it's not so much homogenization and standardization as it is here something that has to do with late modernity. The fact that I think the concepts you used were more right for Chaplin's modernity, with the Ford car, which would be the same for same very one for everybody. Here you have this idea of customization and the fact that you can have the very type of bread you want. On Netflix, there is so much choice. Actually, there's not that much choice, but that you can have the very movie that you want with this type of flavor because you're more in the mood like that tonight, you know?
Okay.
And so the factory, with when they find les levains, I forgot the name for levain.
Rising yeast, rising.
Yeah, I think so.
Brewer's yeast. Brewer's yeast.
Yeah.
Yeast.
Those particular yeasts from different parts of the world that have the flavors of this place. It's interesting that some company wants to gather them.
Yeah, okay.
And kind of steal them. Do you understand that it's stealing in a way, even if they are buying them? Because then they own them.
Yeah.
It's like this bank of grains that Monsanto was doing, and that there, you know, in Svalbard, there's this bank with all the, which can be good and bad depending on the use they're making of it. They have the bank of all the seeds that exist in the world.
It's incredible.
So, what time is it? It's almost 10. It's almost 9. We can discuss a bit fast, and we come back to it next time, and we come back to the two texts. We'll finish the one we were reading, which was something explaining Rosa's philosophy. And then there's an interview of Rosa that we will read next time. But before that, we can discuss a bit this text on delivered meals and airlines. So the text on delivered meals is saying, and it's kind of a continuation of this video here, that not only you can have many styles of food in Paris or in big cities or many cities now, sushi and whatnot. Sushi is not even extraordinary anymore, even though it's kind of an extraordinary dish in Japan. You can have all kinds of food in Paris. That's great, but you can also have it delivered to you at your apartment.
Yeah.
And that's all the more convenient that there is a killer in town. There is a killing virus that endangers the life of the
deliverer.
Of the deliverers. Is that a word?
Yeah, it does. Yeah.
Of the agents of this delivery service, and saves your life. Or at least maybe not save, that's too much of a word, but protects your life. What did you say, Niall?
I was saying it helps you in your life, but yeah.
It's a weird juxtaposition, isn't it? In a way, that people feel so threatened, but at the same time, they don't mind that it's someone else that actually delivers it to their door, no matter what the risk is to them.
Not only that, but they want, I'm one of them probably. They want something from another country far away, Mexican food or Indian food, delivered to their apartments.
To their door.
To their door. So that's the very epitome of disponible, le monde disponible, you know, right there.
Yeah, it's very true.
And with the world as something where you don't go into anymore.
Yeah.
You're in your bubble, and you want the world delivered to you, but you don't want any contact with the world around you because it's dangerous. There was one guy who lived like that. Do you remember whom? Who?
Robinson Crusoe.
Maybe,
I don't know.
but I was thinking about the guy who was the director of Playboy.
Hugh Hefner. Hugh Hefner.
Yeah, apparently he didn't leave his house much, but he had all the goods, including women, delivered to him.
Michel Houellebecq.
Maybe Michel Houellebecq too, yeah.
Well, can you describe that last person to me, Michel Houellebecq? Are we talking about a writer there, or?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay,
French
got it.
And
I
guess
was in
you were-
Athens.
Yeah.
I was in Athens when the COVID was to start, when the first,
Yeah.
and it closed. I was near the Acropolis, and it closed hours when it just came through, and they said, no, you can't go in. And the only way I could get food, because I was in an apartment, was to have it delivered to me, because there was no restaurants open. So in some ways, it also helps people too.
Yeah, yeah, it does help. I'm not saying it's bad. I'm saying there is
No, I know it,
something
yeah.
ethically criticizable in it.
Yeah,
And-
normally I wouldn't. I use that as like a safety thing. I like to cook, and I like to go and sit in a restaurant. And I sat in a restaurant tonight, but there's nobody in it. And so for me, I can make better food at home than I can usually for Deliveroo to give me a pizza, right? Yeah. But sometimes in a situation, it helps.
Yeah.
Sorry.
maybe we will even need them as professionals of a secured way to have us get food in the near future. You know, it's maybe it has happened. Maybe that they are not yet professionals of that. This article is interesting because it actually insists on the fact that they are not prepared to deal with such a situation. They've been very generally trained about it, but not specifically about such a problem, you know. Sure. They know basically that it's better to wear masks, and we're not even sure about that. So okay. And one thing that maybe I haven't said very clearly about the number one, bread, is what I thought was so interesting is that the strategy of the filmmakers, if I understand it well, is to make you realize that something substantial, such as bread, or something that can be thought as substantial, as a substance, can actually be conceived of as a relationship. And I think that's what the film is so good at making us perceive.
Okay.
Say a bit more. Sorry, the relationship.
Bread is not only a substance; it's also a relation. It's a relation to the world.
Yes.
And many other things are. All the things we call with substantives can be seen and conceived as relationships or relations, even if we name them with substantives.
Yeah. So to end on a positive note, where I live in Brighton, they used to put TV screens. Sometimes they would leave a TV screen, a flat screen outside a house to give to somebody.
Yeah.
And now they do this, but at one time they used to leave bread makers. But now everybody wants the bread makers, and the TV screens are outside their house.
Yeah.
Maybe that's good.
Well, it's also a sign of the kind of place we live in, though, doesn't it? Well,
people have more time, so they make bread, and they don't watch so much TV. I don't know.
Yeah, no, that's good. That's, you know, I'll remember where to go for my next TV then, Niall.
Yeah, no trouble. I've given 2 TVs.
I can swap it for some seashells from the seashore.
You can have it. For sure.
Well, I did enjoy this class a lot, and thank you for participating. If James or Sneha want to add anything.
I'm okay. Happy to listen.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank
Good
you,
to hear your
Antoine, and
voice.
thank you to all the other participants. See you next
Thank you.
week.
Yeah, thanks.
See you
Thank you,
next week.
Antoine. See you next
So
week.
if you haven't, please watch the film, at least those
Mhm.
minutes I selected,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
maybe you'll have comments on it. And
For sure.
we will discuss delivered meals. That's done, I think. We will discuss a bit airlines and the end of an era. And we will finish the text on Rosa and read the dialogue and we will finish this segment on the resonance. We might talk about resonance again, but so if you can, buy the book Resonance and why love hurts, and if you can, don't buy it on Amazon.
And if anybody, I mean, I'm not supposed to print it off at Unison, but I can probably get hold of a printer. So if you really want to get hold of me, James or Niall or something, just ping me a message, and then
It's a
perhaps I
big
can
book.
help.
It's a big book. I don't recommend printing it.
No,
I could
no,
probably
but
get
like-
it online and just read it on there. I
Yeah.
probably would do that. Yeah, but thanks anyway, Scott. I appreciate
It's all
that.
right. It's all right. Okay.
Namaste.
Thanks, everyone. That's great. Yeah.
Next week.
Cheers, yeah.
Thank you.
See you, fellas. Bye. Bye, guys.
Okay.
Thanks,
Be
Antoine.
safe.
Thank you.
Bye.
Right.